The warm afternoon sun hung low over Fort Ironville, bathing the concrete yard and aircraft hangars in a haze of gold. Soldiers marched in disciplined formation, their boots striking the ground in sharp rhythm. Mechanics wiped grease from their hands as they moved between machines, and instructors shouted orders across the vast training field. Everything was tense, young, strong, and purposeful, something an outsider could feel just by stepping through the main gate. On that afternoon, when everyone was too focused on their duties to notice anything unusual, a fragile figure slowly approached the entrance. It was an old man, his back slightly curved with age, his clothes worn and faded, his shoes dusty from a long journey. He walked with both hands holding a small metal box close to his chest, as if it carried something precious. His steps were weak but steady. He was not there by accident. Every move he made seemed deliberate. The guards at the gate looked at him in confusion. They were trained to sense danger, but this man did not look dangerous, only tired. One guard stepped forward, his tone sharp but unsure. Sir, this base is restricted." He paused, trying to be respectful. "Are you lost?" The old man lifted his eyes with a gentle smile. His voice was soft, respectful, and surprisingly steady. "I came to see the Blackhawk," he said. "Just to look at it." The guard blinked in surprise. A Blackhawk helicopter was not something random civilians asked about, especially elderly ones carrying nothing but a metal box. Sir, you can't just walk in. You need authorization." The old man nodded, not arguing. His gaze drifted toward the landing area, where the black metal aircraft stood proudly under the sun, gleaming like a bird ready to leap into the sky. His eyes softened, as if he recognized an old friend. "Only served here once," he whispered, "long ago." Before the guard could respond, stamping footsteps approached. A young captain in crisp uniform arrived, his chest full of medals, confidence on his face, and authority in his voice. Captain Lewis was known for his hard discipline and pride. He rarely smiled, but when he did, there was arrogance behind it. "What's happening here?" he asked tightly. The guard explained, pointing toward the old man. The captain studied him with a frown, then suddenly chuckled. "You served here?" he asked loudly. "You served here?" he asked loudly. "You?" Soldiers nearby turned to watch. Some smirked. The old man did not flinch. He simply nodded. "I used to fly," he said quietly. "I hope to see the aircraft again." Captain Lewis laughed. "With those clothes? Those shoes?" He shook his head mockingly. "You're telling me you flew a Blackhawk?" The soldiers laughed with him, some covering their mouths, others staring openly. The old man lowered his eyes, saying nothing. He wasn't angry. He was used to silence. Captain Lewis shook his head one more time. "Maybe you flew paper airplanes in your backyard, old man." Lord. Another wave of laughter broke out. But the old man didn't defend himself. He didn't argue or try to prove anything. He simply held his metal box a little closer, like it carried the last piece of something important. "You understand," he said quietly. "I didn't come to cause trouble. I only wanted to look." Lewis crossed his arms, the smugness still on his face. "Well, you've looked. Now you can go." The old man gently bowed his head. There was something unbelievably calm about him. No anger, no humiliation, just a deep quiet. He turned slowly, preparing to leave. That was when a senior officer, Colonel Briggs, stepped near, noticing the crowd. Captain Lewis immediately straightened, suddenly serious under higher authority. The old man stepped back quickly, not wanting to draw attention. He did not want anyone to get in trouble because of him. He simply began walking away. But before he passed the gate, he paused and turned his head slightly, just enough to see the Blackhawk one more time. His eyes glistened. In that brief moment, his expression carried a mix of memories: pain, courage, sacrifice, and pride. There was a depth in his gaze no one around him could understand. His lips moved silently, as if he whispered to the aircraft, or to someone long gone. None of the soldiers watching knew who he was. None knew what he had done. None knew the weight he carried in that small metal box. To them, he looked like a frail old man whose time had passed. He took one last breath of that familiar air, the air of engines, metal, and fuel, and began walking down the dusty road beyond the gate. A soft breeze followed him, lifting the edges of his faded jacket. His steps were slow but steady, leaving faint footmarks on the earth. Most soldiers lost interest and returned to their tasks. Only one guard watched him disappear down the dirt path, feeling a strange knot in his chest. Something about that old man felt unfinished, Behind him, the Blackhawk shone, as if silently recognizing someone who once guided it through storms and fire, someone who did not need applause to prove his worth. But no one knew that yet, not even Captain Lewis. He would soon learn, and the truth would strike him harder than any storm. That night, Fort Ironwheel felt unusually tense. Clouds gathered over the base, hiding the stars, and the wind grew sharp, slapping against the steel hangars. Inside the main workshop, the Blackhawk sat surrounded by tools and frustrated mechanics. Its engine, usually smooth and reliable, refused to start properly. Each time they tried, it coughed, sputtered, and fell silent. The demonstration for top officials was only hours away, and Captain Lewis was running out of time. He paced back and forth, wiping sweat from his forehead even though the air was cool. His voice rose with frustration as he barked orders at the mechanics. Check the rotor assembly again, and the fuel injection system. We can't fail tomorrow. The mechanics worked tirelessly. Grease covered their hands and exhaustion dragged at their eyes. They had already tried everything they knew, but the engine simply refused to respond. If this mission flops, Lewis whispered under his breath, my career might be done. He slammed his fist gently against the helicopter's metal body in helpless anger. This aircraft was supposed to prove his competence, to impress senior officers. If the Blackhawk remained grounded, all his hard work could collapse in a single embarrassing moment. Hours passed. Lights flickered. Mechanics muttered to one another. Tools clanged against the floor. The mood was heavy and hopeless. Just when the night felt too quiet, a familiar figure appeared at the gate. The same old man from earlier. The guard recognized him and paused, unsure whether to stop him again. The old man held the same small metal box close to his chest. His face looked tired, but his eyes remained calm. "Yeah, I heard there's trouble with the Blackhawk," he said gently. The guard hesitated. Sir, it's late. You should be home." "I used to fix these machines," the old man continued. "Oh, maybe I could try." "I won't touch anything without permission." His voice held no pride, only honesty he did not demand. He asked. Captain Lewis came over quickly, almost angry. "You again?" he snapped. He folded his arms, shaking his head. "You think you can fix this when my trained mechanics can't?" The old man remained still. "I do not think I am better," he said. "I only think I might help." Louis waved his hand dismissively. "We don't need help from someone who doesn't even belong here. Go home." The old man nodded slowly. He turned to leave. But as he stepped back, his metal box slipped from his hands and hit the ground. The lid popped open. The lid popped open. A metal slid across the concrete floor and stopped at the guard's feet. The guard bent down, picked it up, and froze. His hands trembled. The metal was old but unmistakable. It was a medal of valor, given only in the rarest moments of unimaginable courage. The guard stared at the name engraved on it. Commander Arthur Hayes. His eyes widened. He looked up at the old man in disbelief. "Oh, wait, you're Commander Hayes?" Captain Lewis stopped mid-step, confusion spreading over his face. Stories of a man who navigated fire and darkness with unbelievable precision, someone who was said to have disappeared after the war, his life quiet and unknown. That man, the hero, stood right before him. Silence fell over the workshop. Mechanics paused. The wind rattled the windows as if nature itself waited to see what would happen. Captain Lewis stared at the old veteran, the arrogance in his eyes replaced by uncertainty. "You are Hayes." The old man gently picked up the metal box, placing the metal back inside as though it was only a memory, not a trophy. "Once," he said quietly, "but that was long ago." Lewis felt embarrassment burn through him. This was the man he mocked at the gate, the man he dismissed as useless. The old veteran continued in a calm voice, "The past doesn't matter. I came only to help. If you will not allow, I understand." He turned to leave again. Suddenly, alarms blared through the base, sharp and urgent. A soldier ran inside, breathless and shaken. "Emergency! A civilian group is trapped in the Southern Valley. Flooding. They need evacuation immediately." The room froze. The Southern Valley was dangerous. Rough winds, unstable terrain, unpredictable weather. The only aircraft capable of surviving such conditions was the Blackhawk. Captain Lewis's face drained of color. The engine still wasn't fixed. "How long would repairs take?" he shouted. A mechanic shook his head. "We've tried everything." "Hours, maybe more." Hours were too long. The civilians wouldn't last. The storm outside worsened, wind hammering the doors, lightning flashing across the sky. Every second mattered. Then all eyes slowly turned toward the old man. Commander Arthur Hayes stood quietly. The storm reflected in his calm eyes. "Let me try," he said softly. This time, no one laughed. No one doubted, not after seeing his medal. Captain Lewis swallowed hard. Pride fought inside him, but fear for the civilians pushed him to a decision. He finally nodded. "Do whatever you can." Hayes stepped forward, placing his metal box beside the Blackhawk. When he opened it, the soldiers expected fancy equipment. Instead, they saw simple tools, worn screwdrivers, old wrenches, metal bits polished by age and memory. His fingers trembled slightly, but his movements were steady, like someone who had done this thousands of times. He touched the engine as if greeting an old friend. Then he began working, tightening, adjusting, listening to its quiet language. The mechanics watched, stunned, as he fixed things they hadn't even noticed. Within minutes, Hayes looked up. "Try it now," he said. Lewis signaled the mechanic. The switch flipped. The engine roared to life, smooth, strong, and loud, just like it should. Gasps filled the room. The Blackhawk was ready. The storm outside raged. Time was running. Lives depended on what would happen next, and the man they once laughed at was now their only hope. Captain Lewis felt the weight of responsibility settle heavily on his shoulders. The roar of the Blackhawk's newly awakened engine echoed through the hangar like a promise. Commander Hayes stood beside him, his aged hands resting lightly on the helicopter's frame, his expression unreadable. The storm outside was growing worse by the minute. Wind lashed against the doors and thunder rolled across the sky like distant cannon fire. The rescue mission could not wait. In neat handwriting were two words, "Be steady, H." Lewis closed his eyes briefly, letting the words ground him. Commander Hayes had known the radio might fail. He had prepared Lewis in that quiet, thoughtful way only true masters understand. Opening his eyes, Lewis straightened his back and tightened his grip. He leaned into the storm again, guiding the Blackhawk through the chaos with new confidence. Thunder boomed. Wind howled. Yet Lewis felt oddly calm. Every move he made was purposeful, learned not just from training but from Hayes' quiet wisdom. He felt as though the old veteran was still with him, watching, guiding, trusting. The clouds began to thin and patches of calmer air appeared. The storm slowly surrendered ground. Lewis took a deep breath as the base came into view through the fading rain. Soldiers and medics rushed toward the landing zone below. Lewis brought the Blackhawk down gently despite the storm's final angry gusts. The landing gear touched the ground with a soft rumble. Cheers erupted around the helicopter. The civilians were safe. The crew was unharmed. But Lewis barely heard the celebration. He unstrapped himself and hurried out, heart pounding, not from fear now, but from urgency. He scanned the base frantically. He needed to see Hayes. He needed to thank him. Rain still fell lightly as he ran across the wet concrete. Soldiers moved around him, helping survivors, shouting orders, celebrating the successful mission. But Lewis saw only one thing, an empty bench. Commander Hayes was gone. Only the small metal box rested on the bench, glistening with raindrops. Lewis slowed, breath shaking as he approached it. His hand trembled when he touched the box's cool surface. Something inside him knew. This moment meant something deeper than the rescue. Hayes had given him more than help. He had given him a lesson that would change him forever. Captain Lewis stood frozen in the rain, staring at the small metal box resting on the bench. The storm had quieted. The thunder moved farther away, leaving behind only soft drops that tapped gently on the surface of the box. The rescue team continued their work around him, guiding civilians to shelter, checking for injuries and gathering equipment. But Lewis heard none of it. His world had narrowed to that single, weather-worn container left behind by a man he barely knew, yet would never forget. His fingers finally moved. He knelt and opened the lid slowly, almost afraid of what he would find inside. The metal hinges creaked softly. Inside lay a few objects, carefully arranged as though they were treasures more precious than gold. The first item Lewis lifted was a faded photograph. The edges were curled and worn. In it, a young version of Commander Arthur Hayes stood proudly beside a helicopter, not so different from the Blackhawk, surrounded by smiling crew members. Their arms rested on each other's shoulders, their uniforms dust-stained, their faces full of confidence and camaraderie. Lewis could almost feel the warmth of their bond, even through the old print. Behind them, the sky was bright, the sun high. It looked like a different world than the stormy night he had just flown through. Lewis brushed his thumb across the image, feeling the past whisper to him. These men must have trusted Hayes completely. They didn't need fancy uniforms or polished boots to prove who they were. Their eyes said everything. Beneath the photo was a silver dog tag. Its engraved letters were still sharp: Arthur Hayes, Airman Division. Lewis held it in his palm and stared. The metal felt cold, but the name burned with meaning. This simple tag had once hung over the heart of a man who carried courage, humility, and devotion deeper than anyone on the base had known. At the bottom of the box lay a folded piece of paper. Lewis unfolded it carefully, mindful of its fragile edges. The handwriting was neat and calm. The message was short, but heavy enough to break him. A true soldier is measured not by his uniform, but by his heart. Thank you for letting an old man feel useful again. H. Lewis felt his throat tighten. He swallowed hard, but the emotion refused to settle. A wave of shame washed through him, sharp, cold, and unforgiving. He remembered how he had laughed at Hayes, how he mocked his age, his clothes, his presence, and yet that same man had returned without anger. He had helped without hesitation. He had risked nothing but kindness, and given them everything in return. A gentle hand touched Lewis's shoulder. He looked up to see Colonel Briggs standing beside him. The older officer's face was solemn, his eyes on the open box. "You know who he was, don't you?" the colonel asked. Lewis nodded slowly, unable to find his voice. Colonel Briggs exhaled, his gaze distant. "That man saved my life once," he said softly. "Years ago, we crashed behind enemy lines. Our helicopter was barely holding together. We thought we were done. But Hayes, he flew us through a storm no pilot should have survived. He got us home." The colonel shook his head, a faint sadness clouding his eyes. "I wouldn't be standing here if not for him," Lewis whispered. "I laughed at him." Briggs nodded, his expression understanding but firm. Many forget that heroes don't always shine. Sometimes they grow old. Their uniforms fade. Their strength becomes quiet. But their hearts, they never change. Lewis felt tears sting his eyes. He blinked, but one rolled down his cheek anyway, mixing with the raindrops. He lowered his head, unable to bear the memory of how dismissively he had treated Hayes. "He didn't come seeking praise," Briggs continued. "Just the chance to see the aircraft he once protected." Lewis looked down at the note again. Not by uniform, but by heart. Furt. Those words echoed within him like a gentle storm of truth. He felt something shift inside, something that stripped away the arrogance he once carried so proudly. A few days later, a small package arrived at the base addressed to Captain Lewis. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. Inside, wrapped carefully in cloth, lay the Medal of Valor, the same one that had slipped from Hayes's box the night he returned. A smaller note was attached. Lewis read it slowly, his breath catching. "Wear this only when your heart is ready. H." Lewis closed his eyes. The medal felt heavier than anything he had ever held. Not because of its metal weight, but because of the responsibility it symbolized. He did not pin it to his chest that day. Instead, he placed it gently inside the metal box alongside the photograph and dog tag. He locked the lid, knowing it held lessons greater than any promotion or rank ever could. In the weeks that followed, everyone noticed a change in Captain Lewis. The sharpness in his voice softened. When visitors approached the base, he greeted them with respect, no matter who they were. He listened more, judged less. He trained young soldiers with patience, teaching them that strength meant nothing without humility. He often stood near the Blackhawk in quiet moments, his gaze thoughtful. He ran his hand across the helicopter's frame the way Hayes once did, as though acknowledging an old, powerful spirit that lived within its steel bones. He never again laughed at someone because of their age, clothing, or silence. He learned to look deeper, beneath the surface, to the stories hidden inside every person, because the man he once mocked was the man who taught him the true meaning of honor, the man who reminded him that greatness has no uniform, the man who walked away without asking anything in return. And though Louise never saw Commander Hayes again, he carried the veteran's lessons within him every day. The medal remained tucked safely in the metal box, waiting for the day Lewis felt worthy enough to wear it. Some said Hayes disappeared quietly into the world again, helping where he could, unnoticed and unseen. Others believed he simply returned home, where memories of his crew waited for him. But Lewis believed something different, that Hayes's spirit still hovered in every brave pilot who took to the skies, guiding them through storms just as he once guided him. Whenever the winds howled across Fort Ironville, rattling the hangar doors, Lewis would look upward and whisper quietly, "A thank you," because a true soldier never dies in the hearts of those he has changed. And Commander Arthur Hayes had changed him forever.